very first summer camp. And it was a camp just like this. It was a camp at an arena with a lot of people, and there was great worship and great speakers. But what was unique about this camp is that it was in Orange Beach, Alabama. And at Orange Beach, Alabama, this specific camp, after the morning session until the evening session, you had complete free time to do whatever you want. And what was really appealing about this is that we could literally spend like 7 hours, 6 hours just at the beach. And so that's why we went to Orange Beach, Alabama, and I told the students the very first day we were able to go to the beach to wear their swimsuits to the morning session. And so we're in like the back of the sanctuary, the back of the arena, in our bathing suits with our towels and sunscreen, like we're ready to go, speed up the prayer. Like we're ready to get out of there so we can go to the beach. And once the session was over, we walked out of there, we ran out of there, and we head to the beach, and we are running on the sand, throwing our towels, throwing our sunscreen, throwing our sunglasses. There's a trail behind us of all of our stuff, and we jump into the ocean. And like I don't know what your like average like playing in the ocean is, but like we were doing it all. We were doing that thing where you put people on your shoulders and they're like wrestling each other off. We're doing that thing where we're splashing each other. This is my favorite thing. I like to pretend I'm a Spartan, and I just stand in the ocean, like, hold the line as the waves are crashing at you, you know what I'm saying? Like, I love the beach. And so we're out there, we're having the absolute best time until I realized that we're about 100 yards away from the shore. And then I realized that we're the only people in the water. And then I saw a group starting to form at the shore, and they were shouting at us and waving their arms. And the problem is I couldn't hear them because the waves were hitting me, and they were so loud, and it was crashing over me. I couldn't hear what they were yelling at the shore. And it was so deep where we were that none of us could touch the ground. And so in that moment, I started to try to swim back, and this weird thing started happening, that every time I swam 2 or 3 feet, I would get pulled back deeper, 5 or 6 feet. I know when you look at me, you're like, he's ethnically ambiguous, right? He could be an extra in Moana, Coco, and Aladdin, and it would make sense, right? You can't really know what kind of brown I am. So let me tell you, I'm Cuban, but just because I'm Cuban doesn't mean I'm the greatest swimmer, but I'm not a bad swimmer, you know what I'm saying? So I'm swimming, and I just can't get a hole, I just can't move forward. And then it was in that moment where I realized that as we were rushing into the ocean, there was 2 red flags at the shore. And I didn't know this because 2 red flags means you don't go in the water, there's a riptide, and it's very dangerous. And so I'm freaking out because I'm a football field deep into the ocean with 12 other students, and we're all wondering, they're all looking at me what are we gonna do? And so listen, I've been debating all week to tell you this story. I don't know if this has been clear. My youth group is here, my church is here, and okay, stop it, stop, all right. And so I've been here with you guys all week, and so I've been this is a very kind of embarrassing moment of the story. I didn't know if I could tell you, but I feel safe. Can I be vulnerable, right? All right, okay. All right, so there was this girl in the youth group. She was a freshman, but she was 4'9". She was very small. She was maybe, she looked like a 7th grader, but she was actually a freshman type of thing. And she had an inner tube. And I was holding on the inner tube, and I was trying to bring her in, trying to be a good pastor, I'm going to save you, and I'm going to bring you in, right? But I realized that she was actually holding me back. When the waves hit, it would pull us deeper because I was holding on to her. So I looked at her. I looked at the shore. I looked at her. I looked at the shore. And I said, I'm sorry. And I let go. And she was like, Frank. And I'm like, listen, you have the inner tube. You're going to be straight. I might die, okay? So, get over it, right? So we're fine. So I'm here. People are crying. My students are crying. There is ambulances and lifeguards. There's 150 people on the shore. People are taking videos, yelling World Star. It's crazy out there, all right? And I'm out here thinking, this is it. I'm a brand new youth pastor, and this is how I'm going to die. And my picture's going to be on the news, and it's going to say, this dummy drowned his entire youth group because he couldn't see a flag, right? This was crossing my mind. I'm literally going to die, and I'm going to be responsible for the death of my entire youth group. I learned after all that fear and anxiety, that you don't swim straight to the shore in a riptide. That what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to swim parallel with the shore until you get out of the riptide, and then you can swim forward. There's a guy who was a senior in my youth group who actually was on the swim team, but he decided to tell me all this after everybody was like planning their death, all right? So eventually, like one by one, we were exhausted. One by one, we started making it to the shore, except for two girls. They didn't die. Like the lifeguards went out and rescued them, and so they actually had the most fun. They were on like a jet skis, like going on, like they were great. All right. So here's my question to you: have you ever felt like life gets out of control? Like you're scared and you're panicked, and you don't see how you are going to get out of this, and you're overwhelmed and stressed, and you don't know what to do. And if you're honest, in the midst of that, you're saying, God, where are you? Like God, do you even care? Like I can barely breathe. I'm struggling, I'm suffering, and I don't feel like I could see you right now. When the storms of life are crashing down, why isn't God doing more? Like, why isn't he doing something? And for some of you, you may have even thought, I'm trying to do the right thing. I'm trying to live for Jesus. I'm going to church. I'm going to youth group. But it seems like I can't catch a break. And the waves of life keep crashing on me. And it's causing me to go deeper into my stress, deeper into my anxiety, deeper into my depression. And I don't know what to do next. Here's what I want you to do. I want everyone here to do this. I want you to repeat after me. Ready? Jesus is with me. I want you guys to do it a little louder, right? Say, Jesus is with me. One more time. Jesus is with me. If you walk away with anything tonight, it is to believe that Jesus is with you. Because the world wants to make you believe that he is not. And your flesh, like the inside of you wants you to believe that even if he is with you, he doesn't care about you. But Jesus is absolutely with you, and Jesus absolutely cares for you. So we're going to be in the Gospel of Mark. If you have your Bible, go to Mark chapter 4. I'm going to read from the New Living Translation. If you have a different translation, it's all good. We're going to have the translation on the screen too. But what we're going to read is there's this bizarre moment in the Gospel of Mark where Jesus and the disciples are on a boat in the middle of a really bad storm, and Jesus doesn't respond the way the disciples, and as a matter of fact, the way we would hope he would respond. And so we're going to start in Mark chapter 4, starting in verse 35. We're going to break it down. Follow along. As evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. So they took Jesus in the boat and started out, leaving the crowds behind, although other boats followed. So far, this is not a big deal, right? It's kind of a normal story. Jesus wants to make some moves. He's probably been doing some ministry, some teaching. So he's like, let's go to the other side of this lake. Let's get in these boats and let's make our way over there. And like, this isn't a big deal because if you know some of the disciples, like they're professionals at this. Like they were fishermen. They were professionals. They know how to fish. They know how to be on boats, and they know this water, this lake really, really well. So nothing crazy is happening, right? Verse 37. But soon, a fierce storm came up. High waves were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. The lake that they're on is called the Sea of Galilee. And the Sea of Galilee is like an interesting thing because it's over 600 feet below sea level, but it's surrounded by mountains. And so the way the wind comes over the mountain into the lake causes these really crazy like storm effects and winds, and it's pretty wild. What's really interesting is if you know a little bit of Greek, the phrase fierce storm in the original language in Greek is actually where the word hurricane comes from. And so whatever they were experiencing, they thought they were feeling what is the same strength and power of a hurricane. Now, I know if you're from up here in the Midwest, you don't really deal with hurricanes. I live in Florida. Hurricanes is like an every summer thing. And hurricanes is just these really, really strong storms where the wind can literally pull your car away, and the rain is hitting so hard. It feels like you're being punched in the face. It's a very scary thing to be in the middle of a really bad hurricane. But look how these professional fishermen, these people who should know their way around these storms are behaving. Mark chapter 4, verse 38. Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. And the disciples woke him up shouting, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown?" I don't know about you, I love a good nap, all right? Like my favorite kind of setting is being in like the passenger seat or the back seat of a car. Someone's driving, so the hum of the car, and it's raining. So on the roof, and dude, give me a blanket. I'm knocked out, bro. Like it's good snoozing time, right? But what's interesting is Jesus is not napping. His head is on a cushion. My guy's trying to get that REM cycle. You know what I'm saying? Like he is snoozing in a hurricane. All right, he's deep sleep. His sleep score through the roof right now. All right. Another thing that about me you should know is that if I'm sleeping, don't wake me up, because I will fight you. All right. Like I'm not a violent person, I promise you. But when I'm sleeping, if you wake me up, my flight or fight mode comes on, and all the flights are canceled. All right. Like, I will give you these hands. I'm not trying to. You just scared me, all right? But good thing Jesus is not me, because the disciples decided to wake him up, and his response is not swinging at his disciples. The disciples woke him up, and they yelled, they shouted, it said, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown, that we're going to die out here?" One side note that I love about the Bible is that it doesn't paint the characters in the Bible all in a good light. Like so often, like if you were going to make up a faith, you wouldn't make all the characters in your Bible a bunch of dummies, right? This is amazing that these people, the disciples could have been like, "Jesus, like as you can see, it's crazy out here. Can you grab a bucket and like help us out because it's scary?" No, they're like shook his shoulders. "Jesus, wake up! Don't you care that like we're dying out here?" Like they're angry. They're accusing him of not caring. Like the reason why their response is so funny to me is they've been walking with Jesus for a while now. They've seen him heal people. They've seen him do a ton of miracles. But a storm happens and they're like, "Jesus doesn't care about us. Jesus just doesn't care." But here's the thing. I think what this shows us is how bad this storm really is. Like this is terrifying to do. These are professionals. And so these professionals are afraid of what they're experiencing. The boat is filled with water. They're scared. And this isn't a small thing. They think Jesus should be as scared as they are. And they're thinking, if Jesus isn't scared like we are, then Jesus just doesn't care about us. He'd rather let us die. He would rather sleep than be bothered to wake up and help us stay alive. So before I move on, I think there's three things that are true about storms, like weather storms. They're also true about the storms in your life. One is storms are unpredictable, right? Like I don't think any of us, I don't think CIY or your youth pastors wanted the rain to happen today and yesterday. Like we wish there was no rain this entire week and it was like perfect outside. But you can't predict storms. And the same thing in your life, you can't predict the storms in your life. No one schedules a cancer diagnosis. No one plans on getting betrayed by a friend. The storms in life just happen and you cannot predict it or plan it. The second thing is storms are amoral. What I mean by that is storms don't happen because you're a good person or a bad person. Like when a tornado wrecks a town, it's not because that town deserved the tornado to wreck everything. Storms don't care where they hit. And so sometimes when you go through a storm in your life, it's not your fault. Like you didn't necessarily do something wrong to bring the storms in your life. It's not your fault that your parents got a divorce. It's not your fault that you were born with that health issue. Sometimes we feel like the storms in our lives are punishment for things that we have done. And the reality is that the storms sometimes are just the reality of living in a broken and fallen world. Storms are amoral. And the third thing is that storms are revealing. Storms are revealing. Storms reveal the integrity of your roof. Storms reveal the integrity of your house. Storms reveal if you have leaks in your foundation and your basement gets flooded. You saw the disciples' response, right? They were freaking out. Prior to the storm, if the disciples would be like, "Hey, what do you think about Jesus?" They'd be like, "Yo, Jesus, we are ride or die, dude. Like, wherever you go, we got your back. We trust this guy." But the moment the storm happens, dude, do you not care? Like, are you even here? Are you even paying attention? You rather sleep than care if we're going to be dead or alive? They totally flipped the script the moment something scary happened. The storms of your life reveal what you really believe about Jesus. Your relationship with God cannot be figured out when life is easy. A saving faith is a faith that must be tested and tried. So your relationship with God is most seen when you go through storms. And so when that storm goes into your life and you get beaten down and you get damaged, what is left reveals what you really believe about Jesus. So right now, the disciples are scared. They're also very upset at Jesus because he was asleep. They think that he doesn't care about them. But look at what Jesus does. Verse 39. When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Silence, and be still." Suddenly the wind stopped, and there was a great calm. Where I'm from, this is what we call a flex. Jesus is flexing on everybody. Jesus, with a few short words, stopped the storm. The wind stopped blowing and the waves stopped crashing. The reason why Jesus is not bothered to wake up is because he knew that the situation was never out of his control. He knew that this storm was more of a teaching illustration than a natural disaster. And Colossians tells us exactly the power and authority Jesus has. Chapter 1, verse 16 of Colossians, it says, "For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and in him all things hold together." That last part is what blows my mind. Because Jesus holds everything together. The reason why the planets are not running into each other, the reason why this world is not falling into chaos is because Jesus is controlling and sustaining everything in our life right now. So that means, and get this, Jesus, while he was sleeping, was able to control the power and the intensity of that storm. From his sleep. Like they were never in danger. When he woke up, in a few short words, that storm ended. And because Jesus has that kind of power and authority over his creation. Jesus is that guy. Jesus can control the weather. Everything is controlled by the power of his hand. But it wasn't the storm that woke up Jesus. Remember, when we read this, the storm didn't wake up Jesus. He was snoozing. It was the disciples saying that that Jesus doesn't care about them is what woke him up. Look at what Jesus then says to the disciples. He says in verse 40, then he asked them, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" And the disciples were absolutely terrified. They say, "Who is this man?" they asked each other. "Even the wind and waves obey him." Jesus asked the question, "Why are you afraid?" But from their perspective, remember, they were in a hurricane. That's scary, right? The boat was filling in water. The wind is strong and loud. They were soaked. They were panicked. And Jesus has the audacity to say, "What are you afraid of?" And for the disciples, they thought they were going to die. But they didn't realize that Jesus was more powerful than the storm. As powerful as that storm was, Jesus had the authority to stop it. The fact that Jesus was with them meant that the storm was never going to hurt them. The disciples didn't get defensive when Jesus checked them for what they said, because they were more shocked that Jesus has the power and the authority to control the weather. Fear is a funny word. When we say fear, we often talk about we're afraid of something, and that's fair, but sometimes we're afraid of things that we shouldn't be afraid of. But what I believe is that fear ultimately has to do with authority. It has to do with respect. It has to do with me respecting the thing is more powerful than me or more dangerous than my own control, right? So I respect sharks. That's why I don't swim with them. I respect gravity. That's why I don't skydive. I respect my knees. That's why I didn't play basketball with you guys. You know what I'm saying? This translation says they were terrified. Your Bible might say fear. What they were experiencing with Jesus is they had a reverence towards Jesus, that they couldn't believe that he could do this, that he was more powerful than the storm. They had respect for the power and authority that Jesus had. The disciples had more fear of Jesus than they did of the storm. But a better way I would like to explain it is that they had more respect for Jesus' power and authority than the power and the might of that storm. But the storm is not what woke up Jesus. It was the disciples that accused him of not caring. But that's like us. I mean, we've been talking all week about the breaks. We've been talking about the valleys. And if we're not honest, sometimes when we're in those valleys, when we're carrying those bricks, when we feel the weight of life on our shoulders, we begin to question, Jesus, do you not care? Like, are you ignoring me right now? Like, are you sleeping while I'm suffering because this hurts and it seems like you don't care about me right now? And I'm starting to wonder if the words in the Bible are even true. Is the things that my youth pastor is saying even relevant because I am suffering and it seems like Jesus is silent? But the storm didn't wake up Jesus. It was because they accused Jesus of not caring. I know for some of us today, you're going through a storm. Like this week has been like a week of like peace because your storm is back home. And for like 6 days, 5 days, you don't have to be in that storm. But you're like not looking forward to this weekend because you know you have to go back into that storm. Or for some of you, and I know this is true because this is true in my group, like some of the conversations that have been brought up has kind of brought up the reality of the storms in your life. Storms maybe you didn't realize you were living. You were just suppressing, you were ignoring, but you realize that this week you've been thinking deeper and deeper about the storms, and it's caused you to cry, it's caused you to have anxiety, it's caused you to have fear. So wherever you are, I want to tell you something, and I want you to listen to me right now. Jesus cares about you. Jesus is not ignoring you. Jesus cares about you, and he cares about the storm you're in. And I know that for a fact. Let me tell you why. I believe it. Where was Jesus when the storm came? Someone shouted out, where was Jesus? He was in the boat. He wasn't on the shore. Jesus could have teleported and gone to the other side. Jesus could have walked on water, but no, where was Jesus? He was on the boat. If he's on the boat, that means that boat isn't going to go down. There's no alternative ending to the Gospel of Mark where it says that Jesus, the Son of God, is entering to the world to pay for the penalty of sin and death. He's come into this world, but he died and drowned in the bottom of the Sea of Galilee. No, that's not how this book ends. This was never going to happen. Jesus tells us that no one can take his life, only he can lay it down. When I fly on a plane and there's turbulence, I look at the flight attendant. Because everyone else could be scared, everyone else could be crying, they could be calling, we're not going to make it, but I'm going to look at the flight attendant. Because if they're not bothered, I'm not bothered. And guys, Jesus is not bothered by your storm. And so when I'm going through my storms and I'm looking at Jesus, and he's sure, he's confident, I'll be all right. He's on the boat. It's not going to go down. If Jesus is on the boat, that means that anything we might be going through in our life that we describe as a storm is something that he understands. He knows our pain. Jesus is not a distant God that's indifferent to your pain or your struggles. When you tell God, God, this hurts, Jesus says, I know. Because the book of Hebrews tells us that he can sympathize with your pain. He can sympathize with your struggle because he was fully man. He knows what it feels like to be betrayed by a friend. He knows what it feels like when someone he loves dies. He knows what it feels like to suffer, to go with betrayal. He knows that. He understands it because Jesus is in the boat with you in the storm. And if Jesus is in the boat with you, the fact that Jesus is here at all is because Jesus entered into our world to fight the biggest storm of them all, the storm of sin and death, the storm we're all in, and he took it on so that we can be free from the storm. You see, God created everything, and it was good. When God created everything, he created everything to be perfect and good with perfect peace, perfect joy, perfect love for you and for me. We're not only supposed to live with perfect love with us and God, we're supposed to have perfect love with us and one another. God made everything in this world and he made it good. He made the animals, he said it was good. We made the plants, he said it was good. We made the mountains, he said it was good. Everything was good, but when he made us, that was different. God likes to flex. So when he made us, he said it was very good. Because you and I are created in the image of God. When the animals, when the angels see us, they're supposed to see a picture of himself in us. So when he made us, he said we are very good. And in us, when he created us, we were supposed to be able to walk with God. We're supposed to walk with him and enjoy him. And when God created you and I, he desired for us to live together and to enjoy him forever. But that changed when sin entered the world. Sin is the storm that you and I are all swept up in. I like to define sin as anything we say, think, or do that displeases God. But sin is much more nefarious than that. Sin is when you purposefully choose to do something that you know God calls you not to do. Sin is when you unintentionally do something that you know God doesn't want you to do. And sin is not doing the thing God has called you to do. Our motives are stained by sin. There are things that you don't want to do, and you know you don't want to do it, but you do them anyway, and you don't know why. And that's because of sin. And what's worse about sin is that what came with sin is brokenness and death. The reason why tornadoes are wiping out cities is because of sin. The reason why people are going hungry tonight is because of sin. The reason why people have cancer and infections and heart attacks is because we live in a broken world because of sin. The reason why some of y'all's parents broke up in a divorce is because of sin. The reason why we have broken friendships is because of sin. The reason why some adults have broken your trust is because of sin. And the reason why my mom died 2 months ago is because when sin came into the world, what came with it was death. Because of sin, you and I are all gonna die. But what's even worse than that is that we were supposed to be in a relationship with God, and because God is holy, sin prevents us from having a relationship with him. But God cares way more for you than to leave you in this storm. God loves you too much, so he entered into the storm. Because of sin, he was falsely arrested. Because of sin, they put nails in his hands and his feet. Because of sin, they put a spear into his side. They put a crown of thorns on his head. They beat him, they mocked him, they spat on him because of my sin, because of your sin. And Jesus, beaten and bloody, struggling to breathe, nailed to the cross, with the final breath that he has, he says, "It is finished." It was in that moment that the storm of sin was defeated. Like the rain and the wind, it had to submit to the power and the authority of Jesus. Jesus won. On the cross, he paid the price that you couldn't pay so that we could be restored back to him. Jesus defeating the storm of sin and death means that he has made a way for us to have a relationship with him. Y'all, the tomb is empty. That means Jesus is alive. And if Jesus is alive, that means he is here with you right now. The reason I know Jesus cares about us is because he literally laid down his life to defeat the biggest storm of your life. So listen, Jesus absolutely cares about you. But the good news, and hear me when I say this, the good news is not that Jesus is going to take away all your storms. The good news is that Jesus is in the storm with you. So, if you're a Christian today, if you're here and you're a follower of Jesus, he's so much bigger, so much more powerful than any storms that you're facing. So rest in the power and the authority that Jesus has in the midst of the storm. And if you're not a Christian, and you came to camp, maybe you got tricked into coming to camp, and you're just, maybe you're interested in what it means to follow Jesus. Maybe you're curious, maybe you have questions. Jesus is standing in front of you. He is the God that the wind and the seas obey. But more importantly, he's the God that defeated the greatest storm in your life, the storm of sin and death. And he wants you to be able to say, Jesus is with me, and to believe it. So one last time. Everybody repeat after me. Jesus is with me. I want you to say it louder. Say, Jesus is with me. I want the people in the tech booth, the 2 people in the camera, if those 2 cops are in here still. I want the janitor for this place to yell. I want everyone to say, Jesus is with me. And if Jesus is with me, Jesus is with you. And because of that, we can rest in the storm.